Hey everybody, Tommy here, World at War Comics, and I'm a huge fan of Mark Miller. If you're not following Miller World over on YouTube, get over there and give it a subscribe. He has amazing guests. Obviously, he's worked with so many incredible people within the industry, over 30 years in the industry. You know his titles from Wanted to Kick-Ass to, Jupiter's Legacy. All of these amazing Kingsman, all these amazing titles which have been adapted into film and or series. More to come. Currently, Mark has a Kickstarter going on right now. It has 13 days left. It's Psychic Sam. Just imagine a kind of a Frank Castle, Punisher Warzone style type of a character. He's an oversized trucker, and he gets this voice that tells him when a murder is about to take place. And so this guy, Sam, has to make a decision, right? It's quite the dilemma. He has to decide, does he sit back and just allow this voice to continue to talk to him, but these murders to take place, or does he step in and murder the murderer in order to stop this death, right? So there's this moral struggle that Sam has to go through in order to make the proper decision. And I don't know what that decision is. I would love for you to tell me in the comments, if you were Sam, what would you do? Would you start killing murderers and become a murderer yourself, but doing it to save innocent people? Or would you sit back, ignore that voice, and allow these murders to continue, even though you know they're about to take place? So go over to Kickstarter. The link is below. You're going to absolutely love that. But I wanted to get on YouTube today and talk about his current YouTube video that he just dropped this morning. So if you have been paying kind of attention to the industry, a little over a year ago, Glenn O'Leary, who is the owner of Comic Book Palace, he has an amazing challenge. You should check it out. I'll put that link below too, so you could subscribe to his YouTube page. Amazing comic book shop owner. He's owned his comic book store for many years, and he just kind of talks about the industry. He talks about being a comic book store owner. He talks to a lot of his customers that come in every Wednesday about new titles that are coming out. And he had this one small 30-second clip where he talked about comic books today being written by people that self-insert themselves into comics and that nobody is interested in that. And obviously, it created this divide within the comic book industry. People got really upset with him. People really agreed with him. But at that time, about a year and a half ago, and even today, there's a lot of people that are a little bit worried about the comic book industry and where it goes from here. Obviously, readership has gone down over the last, 10, 15 years. And so there is, I think, a genuine concern for the industry. I don't think it's going away, so I don't want to be one of these folks that says, hey, the comic book industry is about to fail and we will no longer have comic books. I don't think that's going to happen. But certainly people are not reading comic books as they once were. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. Obviously, manga has become huge in the United States. I think younger readers have been more apt to go into the world of anime, which obviously turns over to manga. If you go into a Barnes and Noble or any other bookstore and you look for graphic novels of comic books, you might see 4 to 12 feet of graphic novels, but in that same store, you'll probably see 20 to 40 feet of manga and other types of manga from other countries throughout that entire store. So the popularity of that has been huge. And again, there's probably a bunch of reasons for that. Obviously, anime is kind of the gateway into manga in the United States, and we're seeing younger people really be attracted to that. With that said, because of that entire issue, Mark, about a year ago, interviewed 3 different comic book owners. So he interviewed Ryan, who owned Comic Town Comics in Ohio. He interviewed Phil, who owns Coliseum Comics in Florida. He has 10 stores. And he interviewed John Robertson, who has 13 stores. He owns Graham Cracker Comics, which is mainly in the Chicago area. But growing up in Southern California, he had purchased a store in Marietta, Menifee, which is near like San Diego, North San Diego County. And that is a Graham Cracker. And I would shop there at times, and it was a great store. I bring this up because he had that interview with them talking about the industry and some of the concerns that were going on within the industry, some of the things that are working, some of the things that aren't working. Well, this morning, he dropped another episode where he brought those gentlemen back on to talk about the comic book industry. And I have some bullet points that I wanted to talk about, things that are going really well and things that we would still, at least these gentlemen that were on the channel with Mark, things that still are a little bit of a struggle and they would like to see corrected. Unfortunately, Ryan, who owns Comic Town, did close his shop, I think a couple months after that first episode that Mark did with those three owners. After 2.5 decades, he can no longer move forward. And I don't know all the details behind why that took place, but if you go back to Mark Miller's YouTube page, and you go back to that video from a year ago, you could watch that and maybe you could gather what you think went wrong. But what I want to talk about is today, and I think there's some good news, according to John and Phil, who were on Mark's episode this morning. So I'm going to go through some bullet points of things that are going extremely well within the industry. And then I'm going to talk about some opportunities that these two gentlemen talked about that still exist. So let's get into what's going well. Let's start with the good first, because there is a lot of good, according to these two gentlemen, of what's taking place within the comic book industry. So point number one, CCG, Final Fantasy, Magic the Gathering, Pokemon is driving a lot of traffic in most comic book stores that do carry cards. I live in South Texas. My local comic book shop, Z's Comics, sells a ton of Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, the Marvel cards, all that good stuff, and it is a big portion of their profitability. And this seems to be taking place in a lot of comic book shops across the US. So on the good side for a comic book shop, this is a revenue generating item and is definitely a plus for comic book shops. Now, as a comic book fan, it's a little disappointing that that is one of those things that comic book shops are leaning on, because comic books maybe aren't doing enough in order to drive the revenue they need to be successful without those cards. Again, most comic book shops have board games, they have card games, and then they also have comics and other things as well. So it's not surprising, but that is one of the things that are going really well. The two that they mentioned was Final Fantasy and Magic the Gathering. Now, I'm not a fan of those things. Not that I dislike them, I just never have gotten involved. And from a wallet standpoint, I probably won't. I love comic books and I'm going to stick there and stay within my lane. So I'm not going to talk too much about that because I don't have a lot of information to share concerning that. The second thing they said that is really going well, and I think you all know it, there's two things. One, the Absolute Universe, created by Zack Snyder and everybody else that was involved within the Absolute world, is absolutely crushing it. They said Absolute is selling out so quick, and it's not just Batman, which I personally think is my favorite. It is every single Absolute issue. So although there might be a few issues that are maybe, or a few titles, I should say, Martian Manhunter, Wonder Woman, Superman, Green Lantern, there might be a title in there that you're like, I don't like that. I'm telling you, all of those titles are driving traffic within these comic book shops. So that's very exciting. I personally am enjoying the Absolute Universe, and I think most comic book fans just watching YouTube videos and talking to people are really enjoying it. In fact, I was just at Dallas Fan Expo. Greg Capullo and Zack Snyder were there. Their line was so long, it was capped immediately. Very hard to get in front of those two gentlemen to get autographs and to talk to them, because it was just such a long line, which is very exciting. So I'm very happy about that. And it's a much needed thing within the comic book shop world. So they talked about that. And they also talked about the Ultimate Universe from Marvel. Spider-Man obviously is driving that, but all of those titles have done fairly well. And the reason they gave as to why they think those titles are doing well is because there is a beginning point. Obviously, these are Elseworld storylines that are taking place within the Marvel and DC universe. So it allows a really good jumping on point for these characters, because Scott Snyder's Batman is not the same Batman that's happening within the Prime universe. So you could have a beginning, you could tell a story about this character that is much different from are Batman within the Prime universe. And because of that, fans are jumping in right now because they could get that starting point and they could follow along within that story. And there's all kinds of amazing news taking place with Absolute as we get toward the end of this year. In fact, there are rumors that there will be crossovers of some of these characters within the Absolute universe. I don't know if a Justice League, like an Absolute Justice League, is going to take place this year, but there are rumors that there will be some version of that in the near future. And I think all of that is super exciting. It gives you an opportunity to try things with these characters that I personally would not like to be done within the Prime universe. So because of that, I think it's a great jumping on point, and that's the same for the Ultimate universe over at Marvel. So that is a huge plus for comic book shops, according to these two gentlemen that we're on, and they are saying because of those two things, it is really driving people into the stores. In fact, we just got word that the seventh printing of issue 1 has been released by Absolute Batman. And the fifth issue, the fifth printing of issue 4, which is unheard of, just hit shelves as well. So if you missed out on those first few issues of Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman, all of those, they all have had reprints of their issue 1. So you should be able to get your hands on at least the second, third, or fourth printing, and you'll be able to jump in right now, which is very exciting. So that is huge. And obviously, when you have titles like that that are extremely popular and you have fans coming in to pick those up for the first time in a comic book shop, there's going to be a halo effect on other titles within DC and Marvel. So as you're picking up your Absolute Batman or Absolute Wonder Woman, you might look at some of these other titles that have been launching, whether it's Mr. Terrific, whether it's even Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman in the Prime universe. You might want to check those out, or you'll look at back issues. All that good stuff is taking place within shops. In fact, Phil, no, I'm sorry, John, who owns Graham Cracker, mentioned that he is up over 40% in DC Comics alone. He also mentioned he is way up in back issues due to more people coming into the shops to pick up those titles. So that is huge. Well, and that brings me to my third point is back issues. As fans are jumping in on this Absolute and Ultimate universes taking place from Marvel and DC, fans are in stores and back issues are flying off the shelves. That was already a trend that has been taking place over the last couple of years as fans no longer relate maybe to some of the storytelling that's taking place within the 616 in the Prime universe and Marvel and DC. Back issues have continued gone up, and that's for a couple reasons. One, fans want to go back and read some of those old stories, and then two, you still have a huge portion of the industry that is driven by collectors. So they're trying to get issues of first appearances. Maybe they're trying to close out certain stories that took place within a run. All those things are excellent for comic book shops. And from a profitability standpoint, usually the margins are much higher on back issues because normally, as they're building their back issue inventory, they're picking those back issues up for people that are maybe selling their comic books at a much lower cost. And therefore, they could increase their profitability based on whatever those comic books are worth. So that is really, really exciting. They both talked about Scott Snyder in particular. And Hickman too, over on the Marvel side, about them bringing forth these stories that have really helped the industry. So I just want to touch on that. What those gentlemen doing, specifically Scott Snyder is doing for DC, has been a huge godsend for comic book shops. The other thing that we wanted to talk about, and a lot has already been said about this, is these DC compact comics. I just got The Birthright from Mark Waid, but I've been collecting all these. I have about 11 of them so far, and I will be continuing to pick these up. I actually love these. I love the size. Again, a little bit harder to read because they are literally the floppy issues put into a manga sized book. But I take my readers, my reading glasses, and I fly a lot for work. So I will take this in my backpack and I will read one of these over my trip. So I absolutely love these. And if you look at graphic novel sales, for the first time outside of Watchmen, which is always in the top 10, top 20 of graphic novels, DC is dominating that top 10 for these compact issues. So Those are the five things that they said are working really well. And in their eyes, the comic book industry is much stronger today than it was a year ago. So, what I would say is to Marvel and DC, listen to these gentlemen. Again, it's two owners, 23 stores between the two of them. So, it's obviously extremely small sample size of comic book shops across the United States. But they had a lot of really good advice and a lot of really good input for DC and Marvel on things that are working. Now, Marvel has attempted to copy the compact size. So I just picked up Ed Brubaker, which I think is one of the best Captain America runs ever. And they are doing something similar, but it is a bigger size. So when you put this DC book in here, for whatever reason, they didn't copy the same size, and they said not that it's a huge deal, but why not do the same size? Let's make them more compact. That way it's much easier for fans to grab, especially younger fans or maybe fans that are coming into Superman for the first time because the movie's coming out. Make it super easy for them to grab and standardize the size so that way it makes it a lot easier for collectors and for people jumping in the first time. So those are all the positives. So let's talk a little bit, I don't want to say negatives, but some opportunities that they brought up that I think make a lot of sense. And you let me know in the comments if you agree with these. So some of the opportunities that still exist is not seeing younger readers in stores. Again, small sample size, but they do own 10 or more shops per person. And as they are looking in their stores, which obviously they pay very close attention to, what they're seeing is people like me still the most dominant shopper within their stores. They're seeing female purchases go down just from a couple years ago. So the interest in their eyes has waned a little bit on the female side, and specifically younger readers. Younger readers are still flocking to manga because of anime, and they feel like DC and Marvel need to do something a little bit different in order to attract a younger reader. Because eventually, right, I'm 50 years old, eventually people like me who are buying back issues and are still keeping up with a lot of the floppies, we got to replace us at some point. And DC and Marvel, and I don't know the answer, they didn't really give a lot of answers as to how to do that, but it certainly is a concern. And I think it's a legitimate one, right? And for any business, whether it's comic books or anything outside of that industry and any other industry, you got to have a replacement consumer and you got to work on that. That's why innovation is important. That's why they really need to sit down, listen to comic book shop owners, and find out a way to get younger readers into the shop. I could tell you like TMNT, the Saturday Morning, that is one of the best titles in the market right now. If you love Ninja Turtles, they need to do more of that, and they need to market it better to get younger readers into the shops. So just a couple ideas of what they maybe they can do. Again, middle-aged men are still their number one consumer by far. The other thing they said that they feel is hurting the comic book industry is there is no longer long runs within comic books. I don't know if it's driven by DC and Marvel or if it's driven by writers who don't want to get tied down to a title for, 3, 4, 5 years. But the days of these long runs are almost gone. I will tell you, one of my favorite writers is Philip Kennedy Johnson. And if you read his Superman run, it's absolutely fabulous. He will be making a return to Superman. If you look at what Philip Kennedy Johnson is doing with the Incredible Hulk, Ryan North, and what he's doing over at Fantastic Four, whether you like those titles or not, these are writers who have been committed to that title, and that allows you to get in and feel confident that it's going to go somewhere or it's going to last a long enough time to where you feel like you could be invested. And they said that needs to happen more often, especially the large titles. This bringing in a new writer, going back to an issue number one, I don't think that actually helps in the long term. We know Batman's been around forever. Get a writer on there that is going to commit to a few years and really build something fabulous around that title. I think that's what comic book shop owners are looking for. Let me know in the comments if you agree with that. But they said when you're doing 3 or 6 issue runs, the commitment's not there on the floppy side. And if you do want to read that title, especially younger readers, what they're doing is they're just waiting for the trade to come out. And that's not negative. Most of the world actually runs like that. The US and Canada are more floppy driven. But if you want to have that Wednesday warrior coming in your shop, you got to make a commitment to those folks that are willing to do that. And when you're doing small runs, it doesn't work out. And there is a drop off. If you want someone to jump into Mr. Terrific and there's six issue run that's going on right now, you got to extend that and make more of a commitment to get people to purchase that on a monthly basis. If not, a portion is going to drop off and not be interested in it, and a smaller portion is just going to wait for the trade. And obviously, when you have the trade, right? You figure if you're $4.99 or $3.99 an issue and the trade's selling for 15, there is a loss of revenue at the end of the day that can be helping out comic book shops on a every week business. Now, if you're a comic book shop owner, let me know your feelings. This is not my thoughts on it. This is just what came forth from that interview, and I thought it was absolutely fabulous. The next thing that they talked about is the quality that's taking place within the industry. And I think we all can agree when you have writers come in that do these, short runs on these obscure characters, one, if the writing and the storytelling is not good, that is not going to help at all, right? You're not going to get that Wednesday Warrior picking up those issues because they don't believe in the story. Maybe they don't like where the story is going. Maybe that writer is bringing too much personal into that story and it's not relatable to the average person. And if it's not selling on a Wednesday because the writing is bad, they're not going to pick up the trade either. So they did mention that. I'm not going to mention any names because there's some things that I like that others don't and vice versa. But they said in general, the quality of writing has to get better at both DC and Marvel. The other thing that they talked about is just great stories that line up with the films that are coming out. So they said in the past, especially with Iron Man, as you get into the Avengers, a lot of the amazing stories that have taken place within those titles were out of print. So as fans went and saw those movies, came into a comic book shop and said, "Hey, I would love to read up on these issues and maybe read up on these stories." At that time, some of those really good stories where a comic book shop would say, "Hey, I want you to read this because we know you'll get hooked and you'll come back for more," were out of print. And so what they were saying is Marvel and DC need to do a better job at ensuring that there is a really good run, or you have some of the best stories that have taken place in the history of comics around, whether it's Superman, Avengers, Fantastic Four. Make sure those stories are in print. That way, after they watch that movie and they do come into the shop, they could easily order or have it on hand and give them some of the best stories to get them hooked so they come back and maybe they jump into the current run and then they get excited about that. So all these things were, I thought, fascinating watching that. If you're not subscribed to Mark Millar's Miller Time, it's called. I'll put the link below. If you're not subscribed to his YouTube page, you should. Like I said, he has amazing folks on that he's worked with over many years within the industry. Also, others that he hasn't worked with. He's had amazing conversations with them, talking about the industry, talking about their experience, talking about the business side of it, obviously the artistic and writing side of it. It's fascinating. I think it's one of the best podcasts out there. So I'll put all those links in there, including Mark Millar's Kickstarter of Psychic Sam. All right, let me know in the comments what you think. Do you agree with all these topics that I brought up that came forth from Mark Millar's current interview that he did with Phil from Coliseum Comics out in Florida, and then John, who owns Graham Cracker Comics in Chicago and California? Let me know what you think of what these two gentlemen brought up as points. There are other points that they brought up. I didn't capture everything, so I really encourage you to go watch it. All right, everybody, hope you're doing well. We're at that last end of the week. I hope you have a great Thursday and Friday and an absolute amazing weekend. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.